Welcome back to Prophecy Unfolding, where prophecy is truly unfolding. You know, as we look through Scripture and we see all the prophecies that are held within them, whether you go to the book of Daniel, Revelation, Jesus gave some very specific prophecies, things that would happen, that have happened before, but they'd happen again, just as we come close to his return. And I believe we're starting to see remnants of that, but it's very, very important to know this. You know, as I've kind of been doing this the last few years, it's not something I delved into too deep, but it's so important for the times that we live in. But also one other specific prophecy he gave, which links to it. You know, many have heard the days of Noah and etc. But there's one prophecy Jesus gave, and it really links to these other two. And today we're going to be looking at these in full, and it'll give you a full picture of how things were before and how they're going to happen again as things draw to its end, as we get very close to the return of Jesus. What I'll ask you to do, just watch this in full first, have your cup of tea ready, watch it in full to get the full context, but smash the like button to get this out to as many as possible. So someone asking these questions may come across this and get some answers to their questions that they have. As in the days of Noah, as Jesus said, you know, what was the link there to this prophecy?
As in the days of Noah, the words of Jesus in Matthew 24:37 echo like a prophetic thunderclap across history. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. He wasn't simply referencing a time of sin or moral decay. He was pointing back to a moment in Genesis 6 when heaven and earth collided in ways most people ignore. In Noah's day, Scripture tells us, the sons of God, understood by many to be angels, descended and took human women as wives, producing a hybrid race called the Nephilim. This unholy union corrupted the earth so thoroughly that God sent the flood to cleanse creation. In Luke 17:28-30, Jesus also referenced the days of Lot, another era marked by moral collapse. But again, angels appear at the center of the narrative. In Sodom, 2 angels came to deliver Lot, yet the men of the city lusted after them, revealing a culture so depraved it could no longer discern the divine. In both Noah's and Lot's time, there was an unmistakable angelic dimension, either through fallen angels corrupting humanity or holy angels intervening to rescue the righteous. This thread Jesus weaves between the past and the future hints that before his return, there will again be an intensifying of angelic and demonic activity, deception, and influence on earth. Today, as the lines blur between human and machine, as bizarre phenomena fill our skies, and as spiritual beliefs about extraterrestrials or higher beings explode in mainstream culture, many see echoes of Genesis 6 playing out in real time. Are these aliens simply a modern mask for the same old fallen angels? Are we watching in real time the ramp-up of the same kind of influence that preceded divine judgment in the days of Noah and Lot? Jesus' warning was not casual, it was urgent. He was telling us to wake up, discern the times, and be ready, because just as the flood came suddenly and fire rained on Sodom, so will the coming of the Son of Man break into a world too distracted to see what's happening right.
Now, to me, you know, I've studied this for many years, and I've always felt when Jesus was talking about the days of Noah, specifically Genesis 6 always comes to mind. And it's one of those stories that many people, we cannot get away from, but there's many people who don't talk on it because they just don't really know the full understanding, or don't want to try kind of delve in case they could be wrong, because it's so controversial. But I'm a true believer Genesis 6 is what it is when you read it at face value. Now, when we link the days of Noah, obviously Jesus said about the days of Lot, there was one common denominator in the middle there for me, which is the angels and the interference of angels are having a job and a place in that story. But it really brings to mind the warning that Jesus gives that would happen just as we proceed his return, and I believe it's going to be linked to this. Have a look for yourself.
All around us, the world seems to echo the ancient words of Jesus, men's hearts failing them for fear. Once just a haunting line from Scripture, it now feels like a headline. Everywhere we look, fear grips humanity, whether it's the trembling uncertainty of nations on the brink of war, economies collapsing under mounting debt, pandemics that expose our fragility, or the roaring of the seas as climate crises intensify. Violence, lawlessness, and political upheaval dominate the news, while technology accelerates faster than our ability to control it. People live in constant anxiety, glued to screens that forecast disaster after disaster, and hope seems to be slipping through society's fingers. Jesus warned that in the last days there would be signs in the heavens and distress among nations, and that people would faint from dread as they saw these things coming upon the earth. We are watching those words unfold, a generation riddled with anxiety, paralyzed by fear, and desperate for security. Yet the prophecy does not end in despair. The chaos points forward to the climax of history, the return of Christ, who said, "When these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption draws near." The fear filling our age is not just a symptom of decline. It's a signal that the world is hurtling toward its appointed destiny.
Now, when we put this into today's context, if we sit back, relax, and I look at this as an overview, we know about the days of Noah, Genesis 6, the Nephilim, and etc. We know about in Lot's time, how the angels came to try to get them out for judgment and what happened there. But Jesus specifically talks, as we get closer to his return, that people's hearts are going to fail them for fear. Now, when I see the whole kind of exposure of aliens and UFOs, I believe all of this is going to have a part to play in that time. I believe as the natural disasters take another step up, I believe there's going to be major events in the world or natural disasters that we've never seen before. And when the warnings go out to people that these things are increasing with intensity and frequency, people will start to get depression, anxiety, panic attacks, fear, feel as if they're going to die with the anticipation of these things that are coming. But I always believe as well that it's talking about the things in the heavenlies. We know that there's going to be signs in the sun and in the stars and in the heavenly bodies, and I believe that this is going to really drastically cause fear like never before. But in 2025, even over the last couple of years, when we see the exposure of UFOs and all these strange phenomena, there's people obviously who like the idea to think that there's something out there, but many people crumble in fear because of the potential impact that this can have on many people. Now, I'm a true believer that this whole kind of alien agenda is going to be used as a delusion and a time of great confusion. It's going to pull people away from all types of faiths totally, and kind of understanding that there was a creator that we would have in our mind and we think that to be God, or know that to be God. But some people will say that we were seeded here. This is going to be one of the big things that I believe is going to happen. But prophecies that Jesus gave, some people call it a strange prophecy when we look at Genesis 6, such a strange chapter in Scripture. But to me, you get a much better understanding when I read through Scripture, when you understand Genesis 6. Someone I point to that kind of brought me to this was Chuck Missler, who sadly has passed away, does some deep dives into this whole concept. But truly we're seeing prophecy happening. And I'm sure if I ask this question, are you feeling it as well? You know, when we look around and see the things that are going on in the world, and we ask the question, what has happened? Something has changed. Things have shifted. All of us come to the same conclusion, that Scripture is coming alive in terms of prophecy. The things that Jesus spoke about is happening today. That this wasn't to confuse anyone, but to give you an overview, that it goes deep when we look at the Scripture. It's the best written book of all time, with some great truths, some harsh truths, and some things that maybe hard to understand at first, but as you start to dive and learn, the picture becomes even clearer. When we put the two together, the days of Noah and the days of Lot, I believe the conclusion comes in that we're coming very, very close to Christ's return. And I leave on this like I always do, even though we see chaos happening in the world. Remember, God's always in control, and keep the faith.